Welcome back to Visited by Voices Live on Monday evening. The weather's finally broke here in Jersey, so it was actually in the 70s all day, so I was able to do yard work without almost dying. That always makes me happy. I am joined today by Gory Cory, a fixture of the online horror community who features her blog on a ever-expanding website, as well as a queen of social media. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Again, happy the weather broke. That makes a big difference to me throughout summer, believe me. And then winter, I'll complain too, because that's just... But we're almost to autumn, which I'm sure is your favorite time of the year as well.
Of course. Especially East Coast, autumn. Amazing.
Amazing. And I recommend it. The further you can get north, the even better it gets. It's worth the drive to hit the true New England states.
Definitely.
So let me ask you this. Did you make a special pilgrimage out to your local spirit the moment you knew they were open?
Of course, yeah. We were there literally the first day, like they just opened. We ran in. We were, I think, the 5th customers of the day.
I always caution myself not to buy things early in the season because they're selling last year's product mostly. Mm-hmm. And in the excitement, you can be like, "Oh, but then later in the season, like all the new stuff comes out, and you're like, maybe I should have waited. No, I won't wait. I'll just buy too much again this year."
I always try to wait because I want to see like the new collections, but it's so difficult. Yeah.
So, Gory, tell us how you got bitten by the horror bug. What started it all for you?
I've loved horror for as long as I can remember. My mom really liked it, and so she showed me like the original Addams Family and the Munsters from like the moment I could watch TV, and I kind of grew from that to like ghost stories, and I was obsessed with cryptozoology and cryptids and anything paranormal because I grew up in Connecticut on the East Coast, which everything in Connecticut is haunted. So I was really, really big on like ghost sightings and that kind of thing. And it just kind of grew.
So do you believe in the supernatural, or is it strictly entertainment?
I don't know. I'd like to believe. I don't know if I do.
We're pretty close there then. I don't believe, but I wish desperately that I could.
Yeah.
And we could always be proven wrong on this point, but the truth is, in a way, it's almost better if we remain exactly where we are, because as creators, that gives us a license to go wherever we want with it. If it really exists, that means there's rules. I'm not one for rules. So were there early specific films and books and music that got you there?
Munsters and Addams Family for sure. ScoobyDoo. I watched ScoobyDoo 20%.
Now wait, I'm stopping you there, okay? Because this is a big point of contention with me. If you're talking about Scooby-Doo, where are you? I'm with you. I get really shaky with 13 Ghosts of Scooby-Doo, with all the guest stars constantly. But then everything else after, ooh, no.
I like all of it. I have seen almost all of it, and all of it I'm fine with. Like, obviously the original will always be my favorite, but...
A pup named Scooby-Doo you're okay with?
I don't hate it.
I remember
like a different variation.
I remember being in my late teens when that came out, and I was like, what the hell is this? One of the things I really loved from my childhood. Thanks a lot. It was one of my earliest reminders that everything we love will eventually be ruined for commercial reasons.
It's a good thing to learn. Yeah.
Yeah, well, the last few years have really reinforced it. But so where do you stand then? I mean, the important thing is, were you more of a Velma girl or were you more of a Daphne girl?
As a kid, I was more of a Daphne. I think now I'm more of a Velma. But I love them both equally. Honestly, probably more of a Shaggy in general.
Really?
Yeah.
Shaggy, I think Shaggy got all the best lines, so it was unfair. But I always felt like Fred had nothing to do. He drove the van.
The only time I've ever seen him have like more of a character was in the Cartoon Network Mystery Incorporated like reboot, where he was like really obsessed with traps and was made a lot of traps. It was kind of weird, but
well, I guess they recognized that they needed to give him something.
Exactly.
So I'm sorry, but I cut you off. Then onto film and books. Anything?
Yeah. Halloween Town definitely made a huge impact on me, and like Twitches and all the kind of 2000s Disney movies. Nightmare Before Christmas as well. And then I think the first sort of real horror movie I watched was Jaws, which started an obsession I've had since I was like 8 years old with sharks. And Carrie, I watched pretty young as well.
So it's so fascinating to me because when you got to films, you immediately went to titles that were very early formative titles for me too. And I'm 47, you're 17, but yet we both go back to Jaws and Carrie, and I bet we'd name the same titles if we kept going. There's something about that time period that was extraordinarily informative for a generation, which wasn't a generation in terms of years. It's a generation in terms of the horror generation, those of us who find it.
Yeah, and I think they're also just some of the best films you can show kids because they're like not too scary.
Well, I just saw Jaws at the drive-in a month and a half back with Jurassic Park as a double feature. And it was interesting to watch the audience react exactly the same way.
Yeah.
And it's a testament to the film because, as I've pointed out on an earlier stream, right after I saw it, and like I always thought this was kind of a near perfect film, and I realized on the big screen, seeing it outdoors on the biggest possible screen, it's not. There's mistakes in the movie.
Oh yeah.
But you don't care. You're so invested. You don't care, and they're not really minor things. They're like pretty big continuity issues, but you don't care.
Yeah, honestly, it's just such a fun movie. Like, it's great.
But Jaws 2 is actually my Jaws film. So.
Really?
It's not as good a film.
Unpopular opinion.
Oh, I have a lot of unpopular opinions. But no, it's not a better film than Jaws. If you ask me what is a better made film, there's not a question in the world. But there's something about the second film, which is basically a slasher at sea, that has always spoke to me. I love it.
Fun. I love the scene with the plane. I think about that every time I see one of those.
Yeah. I think that, and Carrie was also important to me because it was the first time I saw a horror film, because I'd seen ton of monster movies and 60s like psychodramas as well. But it was the first time I saw something and I went, I'm kind of uncomfortable with what that was saying to me. Yeah. I didn't quite understand the film like I understand it now, but there was something more there, and that was one of the titles that started my obsession with figuring out why we actually watch these things.
Yeah.
And Carrie takes that coming of age story, that Charlotte's Web thing, and turns it on its head like no one's business. I mean, it starts with menstrual blood and it ends with pig's blood. There's not a question about what's going on in this movie or the book, of course.
Good. Yeah. When I first watched it, I think I was in 5th grade, and my mom told me, like, it's great. It's about a girl who gets back at her bullies, and it's a really good story. And I watched it and was like, what is this? But I loved it. I was obsessed. So, and it was, I think, the first R-rated movie I ever watched. So it's like, has a special place in my heart for sure.
So do you think that's an important aspect of horror, that it is kind of the gateway to the adult world for a lot of us? Because that sense that we shouldn't be watching this is kind of important. It's
yeah.
And I feel like the more films are speaking about adult fears when we see them as kids, the more drawn we are to them. It's like, this is what scares my parents? Really? Yeah. So what about, so you just named what I'd consider just a monster movie, because the shark could be easily any monster. And Carrie, which is really a coming of age story with a very dark streak to it. How about the other popular subgenres, the slashers and the haunted house films and what have you, the possession thrillers?
Slashers are definitely my favorite. Haunted house movies have always terrified me. So I didn't watch as many as a kid. I think the first slasher I watched was Scream, because I watched the MTV Scream series, which is very different, and I wanted to watch the movie, and that kind of propelled me into watching a bunch of slashers.
You see, now that's a generational difference there. But so when you went back, did you go back to the original Fridays and Halloweens? Yeah. Was that where that led you directly? Because the film like pretty blatantly points you there, right?
Yeah, definitely. I just wanted to see more stuff like it because I loved Scream. So I just kind of researched it.
So how old were you when Scream came out? Just for context.
The original Scream?
Yeah.
I was not born yet.
And I feel even older now. Well, okay, so see, that's fascinating to me because like when Scream came out, it was after a few years that were pretty tough for the horror genre. I refer to it as the Great Horror Drought because there hadn't been anything that was really successful at the box office since the beginning of the 90s, really. And Scream broke through. And Scream broke through after its re-release, which is what people don't realize. It had a miserable 2 weeks release early in fall and did nothing. And then they re-released it and it became this like phenomenon. But so it was, for a lot of us, it got a pass on a lot of things that we later on would start to criticize.
Yeah.
But at the time it was like, oh no, it's a horror film and it's doing well and people are talking about it. It's exciting. And then they made those sequels. How do you feel about that?
I will say the first one is definitely the first Scream is like by far the best. The sequels, I don't hate them. They're really fun. I like what they say. I appreciate the fourth one because I love female villains so much. I thought the second one was probably I didn't like the second one very much. I thought that was like the most boring of all of them. But 1, 3, and 4, I liked. Cool.
And I think that that's where there may be a different generational thing because the first film I enjoyed, but I didn't feel like, oh, this is a film I'm taking to the grave. But the sequels, increasingly, I was like, oh, I don't like any of these people. I don't like these situations. The twist endings are not working for me. I mean, that was a series that definitely, as it went on, got harder and harder for me to get excited about. And the fact they're making another one, the only thing that excites me about the new one they're making is that it's the Ready or Not guys. I loved Ready or Not.
Ready or Not is so good, and I just can't wait to see what they do with it. I'm sure it's going to be like a really great, refreshing take on Scream.
I hope so. I hope they're allowed to just do whatever they want and they don't have to follow the formula.
Definitely.
So when did you decide that just being a fan wasn't kind of enough and you wanted to speak about this genre and start your website?
Last summer, I took USC has like production courses, and they just had a horror production course with Dr. Becca McKendry, who knows more about horror than anyone I've ever met, and she's just the coolest person ever. But her class was really great, and she kind of said, like, if you want to like get into the horror community, just do something. No one's gonna like bring you there, you have to just break in yourself. And I was kind of bored anyway, so I was like, yeah, I'll make a blog, why not? And I did not expect anyone to read it. It was just kind of like a way for me to get out all of my opinions because I couldn't talk to anyone about it.
So you start the site and people start reading and start responding to you. Mm-hmm. So before you did that, did you feel like you were like the only one you knew that was really this much into horror?
Yeah. I will say the horror production course at USC really helped, but there were 2 kids that were under 20, I think, in that class. So it really was for my generation. Like there aren't a lot of people, and I still have yet to meet anyone or very many people that are my age that like horror.
Let me tell you a little secret. They just have too much going on right now. Every generation goes through this. When I had a letter published in Fangoria when I was 17, I was like, screaming to the hilltops, and no one gave a crap. No one gave a crap. None of my friends are like, Fang, what? Wait, that's like, you read? Wait.
Exactly. That's exactly.
And then, yeah, but you know what happens? They're going home and they're watching some of them anyway, maybe 10% of them are going home and they're watching the movies and they love it too, but they won't say anything because it's not, there is a weird stigma about being too much of a fan of anything when you're a certain age. Unless it's sports, you're not allowed to follow anything.
Which sucks because like sports are just as much of a community as like anything else is,
Yeah, right. And I would say it's worse in a way because I think sports kind of create that whole tribalism mindset, whereas horror shouldn't. And I'm constantly talking about trying to keep an open mind towards other people's opinions on this show because I did see a little bit of that creep up with when all the magazines that competed with Fangoria were launched, the Rue Morgues and all that class of magazines. They started to have groupthink about what we should feel about movies. Oh, what do you mean you don't like this movie? It's a classic. What's wrong with you? And it became like, well, no, it just didn't connect with me.
Yeah.
And vice versa.
And there are a lot of films that like you can respect them, but they're just not for you.
Right. Right. And so the good news is after your college years, whether you go to college or not, because I did not, don't let anyone bully you about that subject either. But you're going to start to discover that they're out there. People your age who are just as much into it. But I was there. I know it feels like there's no one.
Yeah. I mean, the blog has been really nice because I've been able to connect with people on Twitter that like actually know what I'm talking about. But around here, like at school, people are like, Fang, what? Like, Fangoria? What's that?
Yeah.
But I do think my generation is they theoretically should love horror. They just don't realize it because they love American Horror Story and like Billie Eilish's music videos and stuff like that. Like, that's horror. I hate to break it to you, but so many of my friends will say like it's not horror, but they just don't realize. I think they don't know what horror is because of
they titled American Horror Story that just on a whim.
Yeah.
But you see, that's the thing is that the zeitgeist is not really different generation to generation. We pretend it is.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's time. Listen, people from the 1840s definitely had a different zeitgeist than we do today. But the reality is, it's not as if it took one generation, just were automatically online, and that was it. There's those that got left behind. No, it crossed over so much.
Mm-hmm.
So let's get down to the brass tacks of it. What's your favorite horror film?
I go back and forth on this every single day, but I'm going to have to go with either Scream or The Shining.
I can't think of two more different films.
Yep. I really like The Shining because after I watched the documentary on it, I was like, this is the coolest movie ever. And every time I watch it, I love picking out new things because I just I never see it all, I guess. And Scream is what really got me into horror, so I love it.
So obviously Stephen King's name has come up twice, even though it hasn't been spoken. What role has King played?
Oh, a huge one. I mean, as I said, Carrie is one of the first horror films I ever saw. So I will say like the new It movies I wasn't huge on, but like the old one, amazing. And I just think that his characters are so iconic, and I try to emulate him in my screenwriting as much as I can because I think he does a really good job of making, almost in the way that the slasher franchises do, like really recognizable and awesome characters that are fun. They're not like, I don't know. That's one thing I really appreciate is that his characters are fun. They're not unlikable. even the villains.
Well, I think that especially when you look at those first, the first probably 16 years of his writing career, that's especially true.
Mm-hmm.
I think later on, there is some cynicism in the work, and that tends to dull down a few edges I don't want dulled down. So how about literature? Do you have a favorite writer besides King?
Oh God. I don't think I have a favorite necessarily. You know what I'll say? I'll say Dante. Dante's Inferno is my favorite piece of literature ever. So
The Divine Comedy.
mhm.
You can't really go in. I always wanted to open a restaurant. I cook, but I don't cook well enough to open a restaurant. But I always wanted to open a restaurant called The Divine Comedy and see how many people got it. Because of course it's like dine in hell, right?
Yeah.
Now someone's going to steal my idea, clearly. But I think the wait staff coming over dressed as devils and demons would be awesome.
Yeah, that would be so cool.
Right. Yeah. There used to be in New York, in Manhattan, there used to be a restaurant called Mars, which was the theme was that you were underground in a Martian cavern.
Cool. I think I went once. It was like awesome.
Yeah. I mean, unfortunately, it's no longer there because, nothing can survive in New York for very long. But I don't know. I love experiences, which is why I fear that theater is coming to their end, which seems to be, unfortunately, a reality, unless something big changes soon. That scares me because I like seeing films as an experience, not just watching the movie itself, but I like all of it. Do you have a preferable way to watch film?
I like it. I really like seeing it in theater just because I like seeing audience reactions to things. But besides that, I usually just watch everything on my laptop because it's more accessible to me. But I do prefer like when I can watching DVDs.
So I just want to point out that your friend Jamie has made it into the chat.
Oh, hi.
And we do have a question from Mr. DJ Donnelly. He asks, what piece of art, book, music, movie, etc., most influenced the person you are today?
Is this horror related or just anything?
He didn't specify, so.
Okay. I will say for a non-horror, Shark Boy and Lava Girl, which is a weird choice, but that movie is the only movie I've ever seen. And I saw it when I was really little. That was like imagination, writing, it's cool. And that's what made me want to be a writer. And then horror-wise, I would say probably Jaws, because I love everything about that movie, and I love sharks so much because of it. And I think like so much of who I am as a person was inspired by like what I learned from researching that movie, if that makes sense.
I'm not so far from Matawan, which is where, of course, the real case that Benchley read about and started thinking occurred. And I've gone to the pier where the two boys, it's not really a pier anymore, it's a concrete slab, but where the two boys went swimming and one didn't come out, and then a guy jumped in to try and save him, and he came out, but not all of them did. And so the real case, if you haven't read anything about the real case, there's a book called 12 Days of Terror, and it's just phenomenal.
Really interesting. Yeah.
So let's talk about a little bit about your social media presence, because that's actually where I first encountered you, because we were kind of probably unknowingly cross streams just because someone must have retweeted something somewhere. And that's where your name came up, and that led me to your profile. That led me to your website. That led me to reading some blogs, and that led me to reach out to you and say, hey, come on the show. So how do you use your social networking, and what has it meant to you?
That is a great question. I don't know if I have like a strategy really. I just sort of tweet whatever's in my head. Because as I said, like I don't have a lot of friends that like horror. So that's just been kind of a place where I can like joke about it and talk to people about it. Twitter I use 24/7. Like there's almost not a time when I'm not looking at Twitter. It's kind of bad, but I'm a Gen Z teen, so we're all kind of like that. And I try to use it I try to follow everyone I can that's like a writer or that's in the horror world. Um, just because I really like seeing what everyone has to say, and I like trying to spread positivity.
Well, you're a better person than I. No, I think that it's hard to spread positivity on Twitter. It is a place that is surrounded by a wilderness of darkness at all times. So thank you for trying. But I mean, a lot of times when I go on Twitter, when there's like people who are trying to fight the good fight, but it ultimately amounts to them posting, 4 photos and saying, which one do you like best? And I don't really participate often in that kind of thing. In fact, I have a close friend who does exactly that. But to me, it's like, when do we get to start the conversation?
Yeah.
And I think your blog actually goes a long way towards that.
Thank you.
Because whether you fully agree with your point of view or not is almost irrelevant to your bringing people together. And I think good things come out of like involved conversations.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, that's really what I've been trying to do with my blog, is just trying to put my opinions out there and see what others have to say.
Have you encountered any dark responses?
I haven't, thankfully. I've had a lot of like, stop making horror political, stop like saying that horror has societal messaging and stuff like that, but I just kind of ignore it.
Well, horror has always been, the word political is a word I wouldn't really use, because I think it's more of an intimate experience than that. I don't think about politics as being intimate. I think of it as people look at the world around them, and there's certain things that scare them, disturb them, disgust them. All those emotions that you saw at the beginning of the video listed as the definition of horror. And they put those in highly fictionalized forms. Yeah. And other people go, hey, I kind of feel that way too. So, it becomes kind of this nebulous shared experiences of us saying, hey, this is what scares me. But another person might say, I love the genre, but that doesn't scare me at all. There's actually a reason for that. It's not just arbitrary. It's not random. Yeah. So I don't have a problem discussing like the social or personal impact of it. I think that's important. I think that the word political probably puts people off where it doesn't need to.
Yeah. And I don't like to say that it's political, but I will say like it definitely tackles societal issues all the time. That's like the whole point. And that's what most art does. So,
right. Because art is, at its core, art is two people separated by space. They both have these electrical impulses firing in their brain all the time. And the idea is, how could I get as close to the same idea that's from my head into your head? Mm-hmm. Whether I paint a picture to do it, I write a sonnet, I pick up a guitar, whether I write a novel, the attempt is to convey how you feel or how you think about a subject. Yeah. Through a medium, right? I mean, that's pretty much what art is. I know that some people hate art being defined, so I apologize to those people, but they're wrong. That's cool.
Yeah. But besides that, people have been really supportive, and it's really cool to see, because I've never really had like a big community kind of. And it really does feel like I've kind of found a group of people that I really like.
So this may be a difficult question for you to answer, and it's not a difficult question, but it's a difficult question to answer, and I appreciate that. So don't feel like it's a gotcha. A lot of us grew up as kind of outsiders with a small friend base. Mm-hmm. It seems to be a recurring theme in the horror community, because our interests don't line up with, Billy Football and Susie Cheerleader. That's not normally us. Now, there's exceptions, like Jamie literally was a cheerleader, so I can be wrong about this. But is that kind of your experience? Like, did you always feel culturally a bit different than your peers?
I mean, I grew up in a really weird town that was very like toxic and sort of like a New England bubble. And my parents both are not from New England, so it was kind of, they really added to that. But every time I would try to talk about horror or art in general, like most people would just kind of say like, talk to the hand. So I've always just been kind of more of an individual, I guess.
Yeah. It's hard to find people when your interests are outside the mainstream. Not that, again, like these movies that you and I love make millions and billions over decades. It's not like it's that obscure. I don't mean to make it sound like that, but culturally, people don't embrace just openly talking about, hey, I know that Silent Night, Deadly Night is a shitty horror film. I know it. I love it.
Yeah.
You know, that's not socially acceptable to say for whatever reason. But yet you could find any rom-com and just champion that, no matter how badly written or and that's perfectly socially acceptable to have a conversation about.
That's one thing that drives me crazy, especially within like the film world, because a lot of film fans and filmmakers are very like, this film is good and this one is bad, and if you say it's, you know, if you say some parts of it are good, then you're wrong. And they'll say that about almost every horror film, but the second you bring up something like, I don't know, Scott Pilgrim, which is very well done, but there are a lot of flaws, and if you point out those flaws, people start to get mad, and it's like, you can like it and it's still flawed. Nothing's perfect.
Absolutely. And that difference of opinion is important. Because when we walk in lockstep, if you haven't noticed, the society starts to die. We stop talking because we have nothing to talk about. So I catch a lot of crap for some of my bigger unpopular opinions. I just did a hour-and-a-half debate with Jonathan Lundy about the fact that I think that Aliens is a horrible film.
Wow.
Yeah. But you see, the thing is, I'm willing to talk the talk and just say, hey, this is why it doesn't work for me. The things that are important in film aren't. I feel like that the fact that that's still kind of a big deal for someone to just give an opinion that's that far out of the mainstream is a problem. We need to get to the point where it's like people are like, really? That's how you feel?
Yeah.
Bring it on. Tell me. Because you'd think that would be the normal, healthy response.
Honestly, I feel like that's what we should be aiming for, right?
Right.
That's what I've always wanted.
So, longtime friend of the show, Lance Lest, asks a fairly random, but I love the question. He wants to know if you've heard of his favorite band, The Warning.
I've heard of it. I don't know if I've listened to it, unless it's been in any film scores.
No. They're too young for that, I think. Oh, he'd know better than I. He did turn me on to the band. They're three Mexican sisters. The oldest is 19. They play kind of it's kind of a little bit hard to say. I'd say it's alternative rock in general, but there's a lot of heavy metal, like 70s heavy metal in them. But that's assuming, excuse me?
I'll check them out. They sound awesome.
Yeah, no, it's fun stuff. The album, Queen of the Murder Scene, is a concept album about a girl becoming increasingly obsessed with someone romantically and then violently.
Nice.
It's a pretty excellent album. I think that there's very few albums that are like every song I enjoy. This is one of them. So
I'll definitely listen to it.
So it sounds like Lance is on his crusade to make us all love the band. Let's see. I don't understand that comment. Okay. So Jacob is saying that Scott Pilgrim's biggest issue is Edgar Wright's over-editing movie. He kind of neutered Ramona and Scott's relationship. Otherwise, great film.
Yeah, no, and it's a great film. I love it. I'm just saying, like, a lot of conversations I've had, the second I point out any of those flaws, people get very angry at me. Whereas if I say, oh, I like Scream, people also get very angry.
No, but see, I get that. It makes perfect sense. Like, your entryway wouldn't have been the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre because it's so far removed just in time. Now, I would hope that at some point you go back, or if you haven't already, and you know, figured out that, hey, there's something really freaking amazing here. But or whatever your opinion ends up being. But Scream is kind of the right time period for you. It's probably the last major, like, I don't want to say that.
It's the last major franchise we've gotten, really.
It does feel that way, but it was more than that because it did kick off an entire movement in the genre, at least on the screen.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, there's been smaller movements since, like the torture porn or the Asian Ghost remake, but I don't think any of those would have even occurred if Scream hadn't found a way to kick the door back down. And that's coming from a person who actually has very mixed feelings about Wes Craven.
Yeah.
I think I dislike.
Really interesting. The genre stuff is.
Yeah, I think I dislike more of his films than I like. But I think he has high points that are just undeniable. Rock Music Forever wants to know your thoughts on the original Nightmare on Elm Street.
I love the original Nightmare on Elm. I think the whole franchise in general, I really like how funny it is and like fun. I might like Freddy's Revenge a little bit better, but only because I love Jesse Walsh and I love that character so much. But is there something specific I should touch on that? Or
No. He just wanted to know how you felt about the original.
Love that film.
So do I. I love the original. I think the second film is the best of the sequels, although it's a big step down for me from the original. And then I hate everything that came after that.
Yeah.
But that's just a personal thing. I don't like horror comedies in general. I like subversive films, which can use comedy. So like Return of the Living Dead people always are talking about the comedy in the film. There's really not that much comedy. It's a lot of satire, which is markedly different.
Yeah, definitely.
I also do like splatstick, so like Evil Dead 2 works for me.
Yeah.
But a lot of horror comedies that I see just don't. I mean, I have problems with comedies anyway. It's not that I might honestly not have a sense of humor. I'm not sure. I definitely have empathy problems, which doesn't help either. But I don't know. So the Nightmare on Elm Street series kind of changed the genre for about a good 8 years, whereas everything had to have a punchline after every kill, and it kind of drove me absolutely nuts.
I will say I love horror comedy, but it's very hard to do, and I think that shift towards horror comedy was not a good one.
Long term, I agree with you. I think there's some good films in there, but yeah. Okay, DJ Donnelly is asking a question that you're going to love, and this is actually going to reroute the conversation. If you could make your own horror film, what would it be about? Well, go ahead.
Let's see. I want to be a filmmaker, so I have a couple scripts written already. I definitely want to make one about the Megalodon because I love that. I want to make one about Dante's Inferno, and I want to make one that's sort of like Scream that pulls from like a lot of different horror movies and references a bunch of classic horror.
So what are you doing to work towards that?
Well, the blog is one thing because I've been able to make some connections through that, which is really cool. And just writing as much as I can and learning as much as I can. Twitter is a great resource for that. I've found so much writing advice.
Yeah, the big thing I would just say for writing is just get out there and do it.
Yeah.
And then make friends with the meanest, nastiest, cruelest writer you know.
Mm-hmm.
The one that will just call out absolutely everything for you in no uncertain terms, probably swear at you. I mean, because creating is such a process of work and then pride.
Mm-hmm.
And both sides of that are good, but both sides of that are bad too, because you're probably working harder than you needed to. And you're probably too proud of the work that comes out the other side. So you just need one nasty friend. And you'll hate them for 3 years, and then they'll be your best friend for the rest of your life. Because that's how writing works.
Yeah.
It's not a passive art. Someone has to choose to read what you wrote. They just don't watch a screen with their mouth open and a bag of popcorn on their lap. So it's tough because ultimately you're only going to get back the opinion of the people that actually bothered to sit down and turn on their headspace to what your ideas were. So that would be my big recommendation to you. No one takes it, so don't worry. You don't have to either.
No, I mean, that's great. And I totally agree.
So there's a question in the chat. What is everyone's favorite Scream character? Why don't you go ahead and answer that?
I think I really, really love Billy. But I love villains. And Sydney. Oh, and Randy.
See, I don't know any of the characters' names, but I'm going to say whatever Rose McGowan's name was, because I love Rose McGowan and it has nothing to do with Scream, but
it was awesome. Oh, Kirby too. Kirby.
She's just one of my personal heroes because anyone who slays real giants.
Mm-hmm.
Jamie says her favorite Scream character is the knife.
That knife is iconic.
It is. And the great thing about Scream is that they just went to a Halloween store and found existing crap.
I love it.
which makes complete sense, thematically, but it's kind of it's hilarious because right from the beginning all their marketing was done.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So you want to be a filmmaker.
Mm-hmm.
What younger or newer filmmakers out there working today excite you?
Joe Bigos. I think he's so cool. I love his films. Nia DaCosta, I'm really excited to see the things
Good luck at that.
I really liked her first film, Littlewoods, so we'll see what happens with Candyman. Hannah May at Monsters Femme Films, she does a lot of shorts. So good. I think those would be my top 3.
It's good because I think it's important that people coming up are really well aware of what's happening now. It's easy to go back. If you spent all your time analyzing The Shining, you would not be doing yourself any favors.
Yeah.
Because believe me, 2 entire generations have been trying to replicate that. It's better to see where the filmmaking art is today.
Yeah.
And understand where it lies. Not to say you should ignore the classics or the older films, but
classics are what fuel the new films. Excuse me.
So I'm going to read a question from Jess Graham, but I'm going to change it slightly because I think we have to. What is your favorite horror franchise outside of Scream?
Okay. Outside of Scream, I think Friday the 13th.
Now you're speaking our language.
I love all of them, and I love Jason, but Pamela Voorhees I think is the coolest. And when I first watched the film, it was so unexpected to me, and I really appreciate that. And I think it's really cool how they're able to put so much into that one franchise.
Yeah. So I'm on record for saying that I don't want another Friday the 13th to actually be made because I think it's accomplished everything it needs to, and I think there's something really punk rock and indie about the idea of ending a series called Friday the 13th at film number 12. I think that there's just something very satisfying there that we would lose if they actually made that next film, and I fully do not trust modern filmmakers to recapture what was there, and they probably shouldn't, right? I mean, it's a new generation. But here, everyone in the chat's seen this photo a million times, but I'm not sure you have. So that's me with Betsy Palmer back in, I don't know, maybe 2000.
Was she nice?
She was amazing. She was like if you had a grandmother that swore a lot. Really, probably my favorite celebrity meet. Definitely. Simply because now it's not replicable. You can't do it again. You can't. Jamie asks, favorite final girl?
Okay. Well, obviously Sidney Prescott for one. Jesse Walsh, I know he's a boy. He's still a final girl in my heart.
I don't think you disagree.
Yeah. And Nancy, just because they're all, I don't know. I love seeing the underdog, so I love final girls and final boys.
So mine would be Swapna from Game Over, which she's right there, actually.
Oh, cool.
And we'll talk about Game Over in a second because I guarantee you probably haven't watched it because no one has. And my other one would be Natalie from Hellfest.
Oh yeah.
Which is a film that needs a lot more love, a lot stronger. It has a fan base there's a rabid cult fan base around it, but it needs more love.
Mm-hmm.
So if you haven't seen Game Over, though, I'm going to press up on you. Please, please, please go to Netflix.
It's on my
search
list.
for it and do it, because I think it's the best slasher film ever made. Hellfest is the most fun slasher film ever made. That's the difference there, which is interesting that, both of my favorite slashers are recent. I never thought I'd say that. I thought the time had passed, but it gives you hope. It really does.
I mean, I think we're going to start seeing more slashers soon. I think the genre is going to come back.
So the 70s experienced the slasher boom because of the rise of urban violence coming into suburbs. I think with the news recently, again, with what we were talking about before about social anxieties, I think you may very well be right. I also think that it is one of the great ironies that Blumhouse didn't manage to get a Purge movie out this summer.
Yeah. Honestly, like the 1 year it should have been released.
Right. Exactly. The year that they could have been called Prophets left and right, but nope. But then again, I don't cry for Blumhouse, because to me, that's a company that's gone off the rails and needs to come back to talk to their fans about what matters.
They're a really interesting company. I heard a panel of them in November, and their films are all so different that it's really hard for me to try and compartmentalize them, I guess. But I thought Invisible Man was wonderful.
I liked it visually a lot, and I love James Wan as a filmmaker. Not James Wan.
Leigh Whannell.
Yeah, Leigh Whannell. Thank you. Good catch.
I thought it was awesome.
Plot-wise, it has huge problems, but I thought as a visual experience, it was amazing. But my problem more is things like Fantasy Island and even Halloween 2018. I'm just shaking my head at these movies. And what had started as a company that really understood that you could make horror films for $3 or $5 million, spend 15 to promote them, and you were guaranteed to make your money back on opening weekend, has turned into something else, which is more conventional Hollywood. And I want my modern Corman factory back. That's what I want.
Yeah. I'm excited to see what they do in the future, though, because I think it's very hit or miss with them, and some of their films are amazing. So I think it just kind of depends.
But I think on the other side of the coin, like A24 have been just destroying everyone's expectations of the genres. Now, you wrote a blog about how heightened horror, was it?
Elevated.
What was the phrase? Elevated horror. I'm sorry, I try not to pick up that verbiage because I, like you, disagree with it. But I thought it was a great blog because, you know what? Nothing A24 has done, as much as I love them, competes with what William Peter Blatty did in the early 70s as far as bringing horror up to a more literate, more meaningful level. So it's like, it's not a new thing.
It's not at all. And I hate the fact that so many people are like, well, Hereditary is good, but it's horror, it can be a good movie and still be a horror movie. I know it's crazy, but
I would say that cinema was built on the horror movie, period.
Yeah.
The German Expressionist films that came over to America were not their dramas.
Mm-hmm.
That's not an accident.
Exactly. And I don't know. I think the A24 horror is really interesting because at least in my generation, A24 has become really trendy. And so everyone loves Midsummer and Hereditary and Lighthouse. So it's
maybe I belong to your generation.
It's got a lot of people into horror, more elevated horror, I guess. But I do really appreciate that. I think it's really cool.
I just think of it all as nutrition, right?
Yeah.
So, there's times for the gourmet meal and there's times for the McDonald's. There just are. And one is better for you than the other, but that's not saying there isn't a simple thrill to every time you dunk a McNugget into the sweet and sour sauce.
Yeah.
And so you need your Jason Voorhees Happy Meal, and you also need your 3-course Ari Aster meal.
Yeah.
It's just different days of the week.
Exactly.
Yeah. So what else? Do you think that... are you going to try and make short films first? Or are you going to try and pull together a feature? Or what's the plan?
Oh God, I know I need to start with shorts. I hate writing them though, so I guess we'll see what happens. I'm applying to film schools right now, so hopefully I'll get into one, and that way I'll be able to make a lot of shorts and everything. I really want to make a TV series, which has been an interesting experience trying to get it off the ground, but I don't know. I'm just gonna kind of see what happens.
Work with as many people as you can.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to pay off more than any class, because what happens is you learn what they know, which may be good, may be bad, may be indifferent, but then you also make connections. And ultimately, as an industry, just like the world of writing, people ask me constantly, like, what, when I get writers on the show, it's like, how do you do it? Well, because we know all the same people. It's not really that tough. I might not know someone, but I know someone they know.
Mm-hmm.
And the film world works exactly that way. So work with as many people as you can. Listen, I think you're ready to be a writer director, no question about it. But if you have to, hold a few microphones in the meantime, I would hold a few microphones.
I just honestly like working with people in general and being on set, no matter what the role is. So I'm hoping to definitely get involved with more films as well.
Cool. So when you are all said and done, when you have finally got that project off the ground, you're ready to roll, how much of it is going to be fear and how much of it is going to be excitement? And what do you hope the result ultimately is for you?
Fear is in my fear, or fear?
Well, yeah, your fear as a creator.
I think more excitement than fear in general, because I've gotten to a place now where I honestly don't really care like what someone's reaction to my work. Like I care, but I'm still gonna be proud of it even if people don't like it. So I think all excitement.
Cool. So what else? So what do you want out of it, though? Ultimately, besides a career in it, because that'd be great, right? Not having to punch a time clock, except for maybe 3 months a year, would be awesome. But what do you want? What is your end game? What do you want to bring to the genre that hasn't been brought before?
I want to put more. I definitely want more female villains. I don't think we get enough of them because I think a lot of people are sort of scared to do them. But I think they're wonderful, and I just want to make more statements, and more films sort of like Scream, because I really love horror comedies, and I don't think we have enough good ones.
Good ones, absolutely. All right, so Cory, how can people stay in touch with you, and do you have anything else coming up as far as appearances or additions to your blog, or how can people stay in touch with you?
So I post on my blog every other Friday. It's gorycory.com. And you can follow me on Twitter, Gory Cory Horror, and Instagram is _Gory Cory _.
All those links are down below already.
And I will be going on a couple more podcasts in the future around October.
Cool. And always when I ask that question, immediately questions start popping up in the chat, inevitably. So Jacob asks, what horror villain scares you the most?
I think Mike Myers. I think he's one of my favorites for sure. Sorry, my dog is so loud. But sort of the lack of humanity scares me.
That blank face, those emotionless eyes, right?
Yeah.
So that's I think that the 1978 Michael Myers is definitely a terrifying presence.
Oh yeah.
I think as they've tried to explain the character, they've done him damage. But I do think that I understand the damage they've done. That's the sad thing, is like, I almost feel like we shouldn't have 10 films in any franchise, because it almost inevitably leads us down this road of, diminishing returns on being able to be the stronger emotions.
Yeah. I mean, for me, like, I don't mind when there's 10 films, but I need them all to be different. They need to all be different takes on it. And so if you're just going to give me the same formula over and over again, I'm not going to like it.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I don't like when series decide to retcon installments out. I feel like you just need to stop and make something new then.
Yeah.
If you can't continue without disrupting what is otherwise someone's favorite film. Like, someone loves Halloween Resurrection. Now, it's not me, but it's someone's favorite film. I kind of hate the fact that they just were like, no.
Yeah.
No. We'll just pretend. And nothing but the first film happened. Well, wait a second. This thing has a legacy in part because of all those sequels.
Exactly.
Do you have to throw those away? Are you just that bad of a writer that you can't find a way to go forward? Really? Yeah. And I realize it's more of a commercial concern than a creative one, but man, that's why I question whether long-running franchises are really long-term a positive for the genre. But I'm like you, I'll buy the ticket for the next one too.
Yeah, I'm gonna watch them regardless, but I would prefer to have new stuff happen. I will say, having to watch like 50 movies just to watch one franchise gets to be a little much. But
yeah. Well, I mean, in most of these slasher films, there's not really that much to catch up on, but yes. So, Cory, can you do me a favor? Sure. Can you ask me what's coming up next on the show?
What's coming up next on the show?
So we will be joined on Thursday by Richard of Are You Into Horror, which is this is a YouTube show centered around horror fiction, but he is encyclopedic in his knowledge, and he's going to give me a headache over the next few days, researching enough to make sure that I can hold my own against him. But he's a great guy. I spent an hour on the phone this week. I called him to make sure he had a few technical questions about the show, and we ended up talking for an hour about our favorite horror novels. So it's going to be probably a longer show, unfortunately, or fortunately, depending how you look at it. So, Cory, best of luck with everything.
Thanks.
You're definitely a friend of the show. You should stay involved with us. We do community shows in which anyone who wants, I post the link in the chat, and anyone who wants to come on board comes on board. They don't necessarily stay tethered to their themes. They're a good time with a really friendly bunch of the horror community all in one place. So by all means, the door's open.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right. So I want to thank everyone out there for watching tonight and contributing to the chat, asking the questions. You know that you're the reason this all happens, because otherwise it's just me talking to myself, and that wouldn't last long. Anyway, I want to say thank you to everyone out there. Have a great rest of your night.
They make movies look bad.